Hello and welcome to Learning Music with Pat. You know, when you're learning musical instruments, when you go to a lesson, if you're a new student or maybe you've taken lessons for a while, they show you how to play the instrument, how to finger the notes, how to read the timing, how to understand the key signature, and all of this is critical. But the one thing that they don't do is show you how the notes that you're playing are related to other notes. Where are those notes on a keyboard? Now, I like to use a keyboard, not because I'm trying to make people piano players, because I'm not trying to do that at all. But what I want them to understand is how other notes related to each other. How do they interact with each other? And the best way to do that is to use a keyboard, because if you're playing an instrument, say the recorder, there's a certain range that it can play, but it can't play out of that range, or at least not very much. Every instrument has a range that it can play. Woodwinds play in a certain range. Brass can play in a certain range. And we don't worry about it in terms of percussion because they're not playing notes unless they're playing the bass drums that have notes, the kettle drums that have notes. But do you know where the notes are on a scale? Would you be able to sit down in an orchestra and just play music with friends of yours because you could find out where they were at and how your instrument could blend in with their instrument? So what I want to do today is something that I do every so often. I'm going to show you a keyboard that has the notes on it. Now, it's not a real keyboard. It's a poster that I made up. But I want to show you how your instrument is if you're playing any of the woodwinds, where you're playing on that keyboard. If somebody was playing keyboard, where would the notes match up? And I want to tell you some things about the keyboard because it's going to help you to understand music. When you see a piece of music, you'll be able to fit your instrument in with everybody else's instruments. So let's go to this first chart right here. This chart, it's a little bit longer than what the TV can pick up, but I'm going to leave it here like this. I haven't gotten it quite level, but this is a handmade thing that I did. This is a full keyboard. Keyboards a piano has 88 keys. This has, if you're able to see the whole thing and count it, these have 88 keys. And so I marked the middle right here, and I've colored it in kind of like a reddish color. That's called middle C. It's toward the middle of the instrument, toward the middle of a piano, but a little to the left side, not exactly in the middle, but pretty close. And that, if you were to see that on a staff, that note would be this one right here. This note is a middle C. It's halfway between the bass clef, and it's halfway between the bass clef and the treble clef, and it sits between those two clefs. So if I were to take this, and for the moment, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this off and put this on because I think you'll be able to see better what I'm talking about. Now, this is almost a full keyboard. There's 2 keys missing because it wasn't wide enough for me to finish it. But there are 2 keys to the left, way to the left, that won't be affecting woodwinds at all. But if you look at all of these notes, see how high they go, very, very high. See how low they go, very, very low. The middle C is right here where I'm pointing my finger. That's the middle C. That comes between the bass clef and the treble clef, halfway between, and there's a line right through it. That line is called a ledger line. So all of these notes are going to be treble clef notes, and I have the treble clef signature here. And all of those to the left are going to be bass clef notes, and I have the bass clef signature here. And so you have a tremendous range of notes that you can actually play. So if you're playing clarinet, saxophone, oboe, bassoon, flute, recorder, the sweet tones, the little other little instruments, you know, like the song flutes and the tonets and things like that. Well, where are they playing? You are playing, if you're playing the woodwinds, sax, clarinet, oboe, bassoon, and flute, you're playing from here, which is the middle C, which I've colored in as kind of a gray, and it goes up to here. Now, that doesn't seem like too much of a range, but that's a 2-octave range, because C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, that would be an octave range right there. I don't have it colored in, but that's the first octave C, and you go from C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, and that would be considered to be high C. It's 2 octaves. Now, I've separated those and put them down here in this chart here. This is a 2-octave range from C to the mid-range C to the high C. That's the range that woodwinds can generally get. Saxophones can do about a step and a half below. The clarinets can do a few notes below that, but most of them, even the regular flute, can only get to this low C. The recorders, the ones that I'm doing in here, only get to this low C. They don't get any lower than that, but they also don't get any higher than this. The flutes can do high. The flutes can do one more octave, so they can go from this C to this C. Then the flutes can go an octave higher than the other woodwind instruments in terms of their ranges. So what you have here, and I've got here tonets, flutophones, song flutes, this range is that 1-octave range. Then melodicas, ocarinas, penny whistles, sassotos, and recorders can go up to this range. This is considered to be high C, middle C or low C, and high C. And most of the recorders and some of those smaller instruments can get either 1 or 2 octave ranges. And then this to here, a flute can play. So the flute can get an octave higher than most instruments can get. So you're talking, this is high C. Well, this would be what a flute can get. It can get higher than that. It can get up to this C, which is also called the C above high C. Now, the piano is the only one that can get one more octave over here, and they don't write music for it. And the reason they don't write music for it is that it would be impossible to read it. Here is the C above high C. This is the high C. The C above high C has got 5 ledger lines. If they could write music for another octave, you'd have another 4 or 5 ledger lines, and the music would extend up here. It would be very, very difficult to read that, so you wouldn't be able to read it. So what they do is they write 8 VA. That means play it an octave higher than it has been written. So, and only the piano can do this, by the way. The flutes can't get up that high. So here's your high C right here. This is C above high C, and the flutes can do that. That would be this note right here where I have my finger. The rest of this is 8 VA, where a piano could play an octave higher than what the flute can get in this range down here. So they say, play it an octave higher than it's been written. And they write the music down in this range where the flute can reach it, but the flute can't go that high. So the piano can go that high. So you have an interesting range. And why do you need to know this? Well, I think you need to know where the notes interchange with each other, where your range is. All of this is going to be bass clef down here. The trombones, the French horns, all of them are going to be lowered. You're going to be able to play those notes on a lower range. These are all ledger lines. I haven't put all the stems on them, but that's what they are. And you can see that the range of notes is very, very high. There's an awful lot of notes. And so therefore, you have a big range that you can play. Middle C right here, mid-range C right here, high C right here, C above high C right here. And then beyond that, just the piano with the 8 VA notes. Now, is it important to know that? I think it's important if you're going to play in an orchestra to know exactly how your instrument fits in with all of the other instruments that are in the orchestra. You really need to be able to do that so you can understand the music better. Now, what I've done on this, I'm going to take this off for a minute. What I've done on this is I've put in the fingerings, recorder fingerings for those two octaves that we are able to play. I hope I can get this in where I want it. Just enough so it'll stay. Okay, so I have here all of the fingerings and for these notes, not the sharps and the flats, but the basic fingerings. So if you were to take this is a fingering chart. So if you were to take this, you would be able to figure out the fingerings of the notes. So what I did is I started with the lowest note. This is C. This is the middle C right here. It's here on the staff. This is the fingerings for it. And it shows you that every single hole is covered. Now, every single hole would be all of them plus the tone hole in the back, which is the thumb hole. B, A, G, F, E, D, and C. And the thumb hole is covered. That's every single note, every single tone. That gives you your lowest note, and it happens to be the middle C, or if you're playing a woodwind, it's also called the low C because you can't get any lower. Clarinet would be able to, but I'm thinking about just what the recorders could do. Always left hand on top, right hand on the bottom, fingers slightly curved, not flattened, because it's a very bad hand position to use. And then you can get the octaves many times by pulling your thumb down, and you expose about half of that tone hole in the back, half of the tone hole, the thumb hole, and it'll bounce you up for an octave. Now, an octave is a series of 8 notes, and the one note is going to be a repeat. The top note is going to be a repeat of the lower note, or vice versa. The lower note is going to be a repeat of the top note. So say if I started at this D, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D. That's one octave right there. It's 8 notes. So if I use the going from the bottom to the top, that's an octave. This lower note is the low D. The upper note, this would be the correct fingering. I sometimes use alternate fingers, but this would be the correct fingering to get that high D. It's not on the scale. It's a little bit higher than this. But that's the high D. Now, if I want to get an E, this is B, A, G, F, E. I want to get a high E. This is the low E. It covers everything. Pull your note, pull your thumb down a little bit, pull your thumb down a little bit, and expose half of that hole. And you can see for several notes on the lower scale, you can get an upper scale, you can get the register, you can get an octave up. You can't do it for every note, but you can do it with most notes. I can probably fake it, but I don't want to fake it. I want to show you what the correct fingerings would be. That D is one finger down, just the middle finger, and you don't have that hole covered at all. This thumb hole, you pull it down so it's not covered at all. And there are no other notes that are attached. So that's the only note that's on there. But if you want to do a D, which is higher, you do the low D, pull that thumb down, that's going to give you an octave up. If you want the F, you play this, B, A, G, F, and then you pull that down, you'll get a high F. And so you can get your octaves that way. It's interesting, I say that there's so much transference. You can play on a recorder the C major scale exactly the same way as the saxophone does it, exactly. And I mean exact fingerings and everything. This is your C. It would be on the recorder, but it's also the C for the saxophone. Flip and you get a B. You don't leave, when you put the B down, you have to bring the other finger up. So now it and the back hole is covered. That's your B. And then you just add your notes down. A, G, F, E, F, E, D, and C, and you get your low C, and of course the thumb hole is covered. Now most of these fingering charts actually go from the lowest note up, but I don't teach that way, and I don't know of anybody that does. We usually teach starting with the B. The B is easier to get. It's easier to balance. It's one note, just your forefinger, and then you have your thumb hole covered in the back. So that's these two. Why start with that? It's easier to play it. It's easier to make sure that you get it. And it's not so liable to be dropped. But if you want to play the C, you have to put this down, the second finger down, and lift the forefinger up, and you have to do it exactly at the same time, because if you don't, what's going to happen is you're going to get an extra note that you don't want. You don't want that extra note in the middle, which happens to be an A. So when you go from the B to the C, you lift them up at the same time. And if you want the D, then you take the thumb hole off, and then you've got the D. If you want the C sharp, put this one back down, but leave that thumb hole off, then you get the C sharp. It's possible that you can do all kinds of chromatic scales where you do the sharps and you do the flats. You just change the fingerings a little, and a lot of times you end up by half holing. Like for example, here if I want to do, say, a D sharp, here's my low D. Do I want a D sharp, a low D sharp? Move that finger on the bottom of the screen just a little bit, so you half hole. You make one, a lot of these instruments have two holes. You make one hole obvious and the other is covered. That gives you a 1/2 step. Now you can do the same thing whether you have two holes in the bottom or whether it's just one hole, because you're only doing 1/2 hole together. That's a chromatic scale, and what I did was I sharpened every note going up, and I flattened them all going back. See how simple that is? It's not really all that hard. You just have to know what an instrument can do and how to do it. So that's what you need to remember about the register. Now, there's no register apparatus on the back. The clarinet has it, the flute has it, the saxophone has what's known as an octave key, and when you press an octave key, you automatically get bounced up to a higher octave. And if you don't want that octave, well, then you just let it go again. When you understand what you can get for half steps and whole steps, the recorder becomes not that hard to play. But I get asked all the time, you know, what's the easiest instruments to play? I've decided I want to do music. What's the easiest instrument to play. And it's always a little bit offensive, because you should be drawn to an instrument because you think you're going to love the instrument, not because you think it's going to be easy or hard to play. And so I always answer the question the same way. Well, how well do you want to play? If you want to be really good at it and you want to do well with it, then every instrument is going to have some challenges. It has to, because there's no instrument that's so perfect that there are no challenges, except maybe a voice. And I don't know how many challenges you'd have singing, because I don't sing. But at any rate, you do have challenges in every instrument. When you get to play some sequences of notes, B, C, C sharp, D, E, E sharp, F sharp, there are going to be some challenges in every instrument that you play. But every instrument can do a lot of really good things. Some are more hard than others, but there's no such thing as playing an instrument without some kind of a challenge to it. What you need to know is how your instrument fits in, and I'm going to show you one more thing here. I have time for it. Why is that important? Well, supposing somebody wants you to play with them, and they have some music. This would be sheet music. And I just brought in some here to show you how that is. So this would be a piano sheet music part for a song. Whoops, I don't want this to fall over. And you see, if you look at this side right here, you have the treble and you've got a bass. That's going to be, say, either for a piano or an accordion or an organ. It's got the melody here, it's got the harmony here, and this on top would be the solo part. If anyone was going to play a solo, this would be melody and it would be the solo part. And this little line here shows that they're all played together. These two are definitely played together, but because there's a bracket there, but this is also played with them. There's a line there to indicate that. So you would need to know where you would be able to play. What on the scale would you be able to play? Well, it depends upon what instrument you have, and it also depends upon what key your instrument is in. These little recorders are in the key of C, but they can play several keys. They can play the key of D, they can play the key of F, they can play the key of B flat, they can play the key of C, they can play the key of G, so there's lots of keys that they can play. This song happens to be in 3 sharps. The recorders would have difficulty with that, but a lot of songs would be like 2 sharps, 1 flat, 2 flat, and you can manage that. You can manage a lot with the recorder. Well, I see we're running out of time, and I don't want to get too far afield here and start something that I can't finish, so I'm going to close it now, and we'll be continuing with a review next time. So please join me next time.